Hi everyone, it's Gord. I'm back again and here for the second part of our series around advanced consultative conversations. I have my online mug with me. I'm wearing my online shirt, but I'm not in Winnipeg. I'm in Toronto, but looking forward to our session. What I wanted to do was build on the last session. Last session we talked about, what's changing in consulting. We talked about some of the characteristics of being a trusted advisor. We talked about educating clients on new ideas. We talked about collaboration. And I gave you a suggestion to try to think an insight you can take into your client, something that would be interesting and value added. And now I'm going to walk you through, how some tactics and methods. How do you actually do that? What are some of the things you can do to collaborate with your clients and earn that trusted advisor status? So as a refresher, right, what do great consultants do? They connect and convince, but most importantly, they collaborate. And the top two things on the list here is the what, which is the educating the client on new ideas and perspectives and collaborating with them, working on the same side of the table with them, but also not being afraid to ask tough questions, asking why questions, and pushing the client a little bit so as to become essential, being that essential consultant for the client. So let's talk about collaborating with clients. So advanced consultative conversations, require a number of things, but the four most important are bringing new ideas and insights that inspire. That's critically important. We talked about that. I'm going to give you some more details around that. Advocating with your clients to create deeper relationships. It's not good enough just to have inquiry. You need to advocate to be recognized as providing that essential value. Redefine client needs and telling convincing stories. Those are the four things that really you can implement to be that trusted advisor. So let's talk about insights. What is an insight? So there's a number of characteristics of insights. One, they need to be new. You need to be telling the client something they didn't already know. It doesn't necessarily need to be a new concept, but it has to be new to the client, right? So it can't be, pedestrian concepts. It has to be something that they would recognize as interesting and new. It needs to be noteworthy. So noteworthy in my mind is the client has an aha moment. I've never thought of that, or I've never thought about it that way. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to become a bit of a change agent, and you're also trying to be valuable in every interaction that you have. And then the third piece is about being, you can be non-intuitive, right? So take a provocative position on something that you can defend, but something that's interesting to the client. So an insight has to have all three of these characteristics in order to be valuable. What you don't want to do is have something that's not really all that new, something they may already know, and you try to take it in, and it doesn't really come across as valuable as you'd like, right? I'm a big believer in personalized insights. You think about the individual, you think about their challenges from the last session, you understand their business, their industry, their processes, their pain points, you've done your homework, you have a complete view of the client. I suggested for Suncor something around crude by rail, which worked really well. And when you do that, when they're client and company and industry specific, they tend to be really interesting. So make sure you have these three characteristics. And they don't necessarily need to be like a super huge insight. So let me give you an example. So a couple weeks ago, I was in an oral session with a large Canadian bank that's headquartered in Western Canada. You could probably guess who it is. We were invited to present to their senior leadership, and we were invited to present with three other firms. And I was racking my brain, like, how do we stand out? How can we deliver an insight? I don't really know this company that well because they've just invited us into a structured procurement. We've done a good enough job on the RFP that they've invited us to be one of the three finalists, but I wanted to stand out. So what could we do? So what we did was we opened orals with an insight. And the insight was we took the time to mystery shop this bank in their commercial lending division. So me and my team called in, and we asked and we inquired about commercial services for a Canadian company, and we told them what we were looking for, and we assessed the quality of the conversation that that commercial lending officer had with us. So we mystery shopped them, and then we collated the mystery shopping results into an insight to say, so we opened the meeting rather than saying, hey, here's how wonderful the Rain Group is, and look at all our clients, and aren't we awesome? We have all these banks. And instead of doing that, we opened with, we still talked about that, but we opened with, hey, as part of our process to get to know you, we took the extra step to mystery shop your commercial lending function. We went to these 4 branches. We had conversations with a bunch of people. Obviously, we didn't name the people. And this is what we learned. We learned that the conversation wasn't consistent. We learned that in many cases there were questions that weren't asked that could have been. In many cases there was opportunities to cross-sell. They didn't ask any other questions about any of our financial needs, and so we were able to, 1, deliver something they didn't already know, but 2, demonstrate that we're willing to collaborate with them. So often people think about insights as something huge that takes a lot of effort. That literally took 2 hours to do. An hour to do the mystery shopping, there was 3 or 4 of us, and an hour to put together the results, and we had a standout opening to our presentation that supports the concepts of collaboration. So that's a great example. That really, this is the content that clients are looking for. Number 1, primary relevant research. That's exactly what I showed you, is that the banking mystery shopping that we did, that's primary research. You could do that. You could look at digital properties in a company. You could assess the usability of their website. You could assess the customer experience across channels. You could mystery shop them. You could use that to have a conversation. You could use that to introduce new service lines. You could do the same thing in CRM. That type of primary research goes over really well and is really highly desired. This is the stuff that clients have told us they're looking for from their consulting organizations. Capabilities descriptions, if they're in the market for a new CRM system, if you're able to describe your capabilities. That's not the capabilities pitch that I talked about where you open your trench coat and say, here's all the things they do. This is, here's the capabilities that are relevant to you because I know your business, I know your industry, and here's how they generate business outcomes. Customized content, when clients feel like the content's been customized to them, they're much more receptive. I have a client that recently went into orals for the 407 ETR. For those of you in Toronto, that's a major toll highway in Toronto, super expensive. They did a quick and dirty assessment of, what they could save with improved interaction efficiency in the call center. They got all the information out of their annual report and a little bit from the requirements document. They went into orals and they opened with that. Hey, we've looked at you guys and this is what we see. Are we right? Doesn't matter if you're perfectly right. What matters is that you've opened the conversation to debate, what you think the savings may or may not be, and you're having a value conversation. You're not talking about, all your service lines and talking about, about yourselves. So the suggestion I always have is whenever you're talking to a client, try to substitute the word you wherever you feel compelled to say we. So for example, and this is again a little bit about the customized content, but say for example, you want to talk about, hey, we have North American capabilities. So we at Online, we have a North American team. Well, that's about you. If you want to make it about the client, you could say you would have access to resources all across North America that would make supporting the project much easier. You've suddenly made something that was about you, about the client, and it's way more interesting and it's customized. If you can provide insight on how to solve problems, it doesn't matter which service line, in CRM, if you're deploying Salesforce and they have an ERP system and you might have a perspective on the new functionality Salesforce offers in CPQ, configure, price, quote, that would make their ERP system more efficient. So bringing insights on how you might solve the business problems they're looking to solve also is really valuable to clients in any kind of best practices methodology. At the Rain Group, one of the ways that we do this is we have a global research panel. We now have 3,000 people that are, consulting leaders, sales leaders, from around the world that participate in our advanced research. And we produce research reports that are very detailed on different aspects of running effective sales and marketing. We do have some that are related to consulting as well. We invite our clients to participate in this. When we have new research, we call them up and say, hey, would you like to go through this research? And if they do, we do kind of a half an hour review. Hey, here's what the research says and here's how it might apply to you. That stuff's really interesting. Even the offer to do that, if you offered to say, hey, we have a point of view on, what are the 10 ways to structure a digital transformation that will lead to the, best business outcomes. And you offer that to your client, and just say they say, no, and I can't really do that right now, maybe in a couple months. The fact that you've offered it makes a difference in how they perceive you. You're actually being proactive about trying to educate them. So these are the 5 things that the clients want. You can, in order to communicate value, these are the 6 methods that we suggest that you build insights around. So a new idea, right? So a new idea would be like the crude by rail example that I mentioned in the last session. So giving us an example of how a company might make the decision to ship crude oil by rail. That's a really novel, interesting business practice that you could have. I've talked to some of your team, the intersection of cybersecurity and digital transformation, if you can create a point of view around that. If you had, some new idea around, how to make CRM adoption better, bring those new ideas to your clients proactively. They'll value you for it, and you'll earn a much more influential status in your client organizations. Best practices. The Rain Group Center of Sales Research, when we do that, is a really good example. All of the big consulting firms are awesome at doing this. They constantly produce research that they use to interact with their clients around best practices. They generally have BCG, Deloitte, PwC. They'll have, research around functional areas, supply chain, the office of the CMO, the office of the CFO, chief risk officer, all these kinds of things. They'll have best practices libraries, and they'll reach out with this stuff in order to be perceived as valuable, educating the client, etc. Straightforward results. So I'll give you an example of that is if you can inventory the financial impact of your client projects, and if you reach out to clients and say, hey, we've worked with a similar client, we worked with them in this area, we were able to demonstrate these type of results. I thought you might be interested in learning more about this project. Can I get 10 or 15 minutes on your schedule to walk you through it? You'll find that clients are really receptive and interested in that. I'll give you an example. When I was at Ideaca, we did a project for Air Canada, specifically Jazz Airlines. In the aviation industry, they have two really high cost elements in their P&L. One is maintenance, one is labor. Sadly, most airlines want to have the least experienced pilot flying the plane because they cost less. So we wrote an application, a BI application using Power BI, SQL Server, and some other technology to optimize the crew schedule at Jazz, i.e., how can we have the least expensive resource flying the planes most frequently? When you have a seasoned pilot, they've been around for 25 years, they get into an overtime position, they cost a fortune, right? So we built this application and we took $2 million out of their payroll in 6 months. And so what we did, this is more on the selling side, but we reached out to all the other regional airlines and said, hi, when we asked for permission from Jazz, we just didn't do it, without any sort of approval. We didn't mention their name, but we said, hey, we've recently worked with another regional airline. We were able to take $2 million out of their payroll in 6 months through optimizing their crew schedule. Would you like to have a meeting and discuss it? And, we reached out. I think we got 8 of 12 CEOs of regionals we got a conversation with because it was super specific. We had, like I said earlier in the earlier session, we knew the business, the industry, the outcome. Buyers are looking for confidence that they're going to, and persuasion that they're going to get the results that they wanted. In that case, it was super clear. And we did sell one other project, but more importantly, we got a bunch of good conversations going. Capabilities, that's about capabilities that are relevant to the client, not just broad capabilities. Sometimes it makes sense to offer a demonstration of something that's super specific. And then, a great way to meet clients is always, if you're attending some of the same industry events or solution events, like the next big cybersecurity event is, maybe combine a couple of these, say, hey, we have a really great best practices paper on cybersecurity. Can we meet at the conference and spend 10 minutes and I'll go over it with you? So those are the methods. I really like new ideas, best practice, and straightforward results as things that you can communicate to your clients that are going to change their perception of you.
That is fantastic, Gord. Thank you so much again for all the stories and the insights. I can't wait for the next part of the series.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks.